Think about the last meeting you were in. Not what the meeting was about. Forget the agenda, forget the slides. Just think about the people. There was probably someone who answered first, before the question had quite finished being asked. Someone who needed to be seen to know. There was probably someone else who went very still when attention moved towards them, who chose every word with a particular kind of care. Not because they were precise, because they could not bear to be wrong in front of people. There may have been someone who made everybody laugh at the moment the room became tense. And perhaps someone else who spent the entire meeting hoping, quietly and intently, please don't call on me. I have no idea what this meeting is about. Now, when do you think those people learn to do that? Because I have a theory. I'm not sure we ever really leave school. I think some of us have just been changing classrooms. The furniture gets better, the coffee gets worse, the teacher becomes a managing director. And apparently we're all adults now. But look again. There's the person with their hand up before the question is finished, or if it's a Teams call, with the yellow hand sign. There's a person who knows the answer but won't risk saying anything. There's a class clown, right? There's the invincible child. And I know this because I have been all of them. 16 years in corporate life, and I've watched different rooms bring different versions of me to life. I have answered too quickly. I have disappeared. I have made the joke. I have gone still. Same person, different room, different threat, different strategy. And that made me wonder, when did I learn those strategies in the first place? Because here's the strange thing about school. We talk about it as a place that teaches you things. Maths, history, science, grammar. And obviously it does. But underneath the official curriculum, there is another one. Nobody writes it down. Nobody sends it home to your parents. There is no exam at the end. But you are tested on it every day. Who gets praised? Who gets interrupted? Who is allowed to be difficult? Who has to be pleasant? What happens when you are wrong? What happens when you are right and the teacher is wrong? What happens to the child who asks one question too many? What happens to the child whose body cannot sit still? What happens to the child who understands everything, but not quickly? What happens when you are clever in a way the room knows how to measure? And what happens when you are clever in a way it doesn't? That is a curriculum too. And I wonder if some of us learned it better than anything else. Now, what would have to be true for this idea to be wrong? It would have to be true that we can cleanly separate what a room teaches us explicitly from what it teaches us socially. That we can learn algebra without learning whether mistakes are dangerous. That we can learn to read without learning who gets listened to. That we can be ranked, corrected, praised, ignored, compared, and watched for years, and somehow emerge having absorbed only the syllabus. Maybe some people do. Maybe a confident adult is not a frightened school kid with a better salary. Maybe the person dominating your meeting is simply annoying. Also possible. But I keep returning to the room because the room changes people. I know people who are brilliant one-to-one and almost voiceless in a group. People who are warm with friends and strangely performative around authority. People who can challenge a spouse, a parent, a stranger, but become 12 years old in front of someone with a senior job title. Why? And I'm not asking that rhetorically. Really, why? What is the body recognizing? A person or a structure? Because maybe that's what we underestimate. School doesn't only introduce us to knowledge, right? For many of us, it's our first sustained encounter with an institution. A timetable you didn't choose. Rules you did not write. Authority you were expected to accept. Permission to speak, permission to leave, permission to use the toilet. A system deciding what counts as good. And then telling you where you rank. And yes, schools can be extraordinary places. A teacher can alter the trajectory of a life. A classroom can be the first place a child feels seen. Education can open a door that an entire family has been standing outside for generations. This is not an argument against school. It is an argument for looking more carefully at everything school teaches. Perhaps it formats us for certain versions of it. Sit here, speak now, wait, compete, perform. Don't interrupt. Be exceptional, but not inconvenient. Ask questions, but not that one. And then we enter adulthood and wonder why the meeting room feels strangely familiar. Why one person performs certainty, why another person disappears. Why somebody makes a joke exactly when the tension becomes unbearable. Why a grown adult hears, "Can I have a word?" and their entire nervous system travels back 20 years. I've been thinking about the children we were in those rooms. The ones who adapted beautifully. The ones who didn't. And the ones who adapted so beautifully that nobody noticed what it cost them. Maybe growing up is not the same thing as outgrowing. Maybe adulthood is partly the long, slow process of discovering which rules still deserve our obedience. So, at your next meeting, forget the agenda for a moment. Look around the room, and then look again. You may not be sitting with a group of adults discussing the quarterly performance. You may be sitting with a room full of children, still trying to work out what happens if they get the answer wrong. So, is the question about what we learned at school? Or is it whether we've actually been given permission to leave?